They thought he was just a frail older man. They didn't know he once led his squad through gunfire, and they had no idea he would teach them the biggest lesson of their lives in silence. In a quiet residential area on the south side of Spokane, Washington, where pine-covered hills stretched to the horizon, the air always carried a hint of resin mixed with morning coffee from small roadside cafes. An older man lived in a modest ground-floor apartment. Henry Hank Lawson, 92 years old, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps. He had survived 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and carried with him the psychological scars of an era where both glory and loss had long faded into silence. His apartment was small, but tidy, like a miniature barracks. Framed black and white photos lined the walls, some already faded, capturing moments with comrades who never returned. On his desk sat a handwritten letter from his only grandson Tommy, a cadet at a military academy in Georgia, the one remaining connection that kept him tied to the present. Every morning at precisely 7 o'clock, Hank would step out wearing an old USMC ball cap, holding a dark mahogany cane he'd carved himself, and a worn-out khaki jacket marked with military insignia. He'd walk to the bakery on the corner to buy a spicy chicken sandwich, the one indulgence he allowed himself every weekend. But Hank's life, though solitary, wasn't sad. He had accepted silence, and within that silence was the quiet strength of a generation few were left to speak for. The city he lived in now was nothing like the one he grew up in. Kids no longer nodded in respect when they passed their elders. Teenagers gathered on street corners, headphones and vape pens in their mouths, their stares blank, their disrespect worn like part of their identity. Hank didn't blame them. He knew that what isn't taught can't be expected to be learned. Still, he walked every day. They still wore the old Marine cap, not because he wanted attention, but because he was a man of principle, a soldier even 40 years after leaving the service. It was just that. On that afternoon, the city was no longer peaceful. On Saturday afternoon, Mr. Henry put on his worn-out jacket with a faded unit patch, picked up his wooden cane, and slowly walked along the familiar sidewalk toward the corner bakery. The sky was clear. The air was cool, and the streets were as busy as always on weekends. For him, a small, sweet treat on a Saturday afternoon was a reward to himself after long, quiet, solitary days. As he turned onto the narrow path beside the bakery, he saw 4 teenagers gathered on the steps. Loud rap music blared from a phone speaker, and their laughter drowned out even the sound of the evening birds. They sat with their legs stretched across the bench, blocking the walkway, snacking and puffing on cigarettes. Mr. Henry stopped and spoke politely. "Excuse me, boys, may I get through?" A tall, lanky kid with dyed red hair sneered. "Oh, old man wants to get by us." The whole group burst out laughing. Another one scrunched his face in mockery. "An old soldier, huh? The cane and jacket. What is this cosplay?" Henry didn't respond. He gripped the top of his cane a little tighter and tried to stay calm. Then things took a turn. The ringleader, clearly trying to show off in front of his friends, stepped close to Henry and suddenly gave him a sharp nudge with his shoulder strong enough to knock him off balance. Before Henry could react, the kid stepped slightly behind him and shoved hard. Henry's frail body crashed to the curb like a broken branch. His glasses flew off and shattered. His cane rolled away. His hand scraped along the concrete, leaving bleeding scratches. No one nearby stepped in. A few witnesses quietly turned away. A few feet away, a young woman covered her mouth with her hands, frozen and unsure of what to do. Laughter erupted behind him. Time for retirement, old man. War stories are ancient history. This is our time now, one of them shouted. Henry said nothing. He didn't cry out. He quietly pushed himself up, retrieved his cane, and picked up the pieces of his broken glasses. Blood dripped from the back of his hand, but he didn't bother to look down. As he stood up, his gaze passed over the group of teenagers. There was no anger, no fear, only a deep, steel-cold stare, the kind seen in someone who had crawled through minefields in Kandahar, who had pulled wounded comrades from Taliban gunfire in the dark of night. And that look made the group pause, just for a second. But then they laughed even louder, pulling out a phone to snap a photo, like it was all just a joke. Henry turned and walked away without a word. No call to the police, no asking for help. There is no demand for justice. But something in his walk had changed. He was no longer just an older man out for a sweet. He was a Marine veteran marking the day of his return. Henry's small apartment was on the second floor of an old building where the wooden stairs creaked with every step he took. He opened the door and took off his shoes like he always did, but this time his hands were still slightly trembling from the earlier fall. The scrape on his hand had dried, but the real pain wasn't in the flesh. He quietly walked over to the desk by the window, where the late afternoon light was casting long shadows across the worn wooden surface. With a slow but deliberate motion, he pulled open the drawer and took out a leather-bound notebook with frayed corners. Every time he touched it, it felt like reaching back into his youth, the years of smoke bullets, blood, and solemn vows. He opened the notebook. Each page contained handwritten letters from soldiers. He had once saved stories of survival, thanks to the quick decisions of a seasoned commander, heartfelt thanks written with sincerity, some signed with tear-stained ink. On the inside cover of the notebook, taped with cloudy adhesive, was an old business card. Lieutenant Sean Morales, Marine Corps Training Detachment, Red Rock Base. Henry turned it over and studied it for a long moment. The young recruit who had once trembled during his first time on the range was now the commanding officer of an entire Marine training station just 10 miles away. That same Marine had once said, "If it weren't for Sergeant Henry Green, I wouldn't have made it through the Ramadi operation." Henry reached for his desk phone, a corded model with a silver-gray plastic casing. His fingers pressed each number, slowly but firmly, each key giving off a crisp click. The phone rang, once, twice. Then a young male voice came on, steady and formal. "Red Rock Marine Training Station. Lieutenant Morales speaking." Henry didn't speak for a moment, then said in a low but clear voice, "This is Henry Green. Do you remember me?" There was a brief pause on the other end. Then came a soft laugh like a soldier recognizing an old and respected commander. "God. Sergeant Green, how could I forget? You were the one who shaped me." Everyone here still talks about you. How have you been, sir? Henry gave a dry smile, but didn't answer the question. His tone suddenly firmed. A group of people need to relearn the meaning of respect, and I think you know how to teach it. Morales's voice shifted immediately sharp and severe. Give me the location and time. Henry closed his eyes briefly, as if tapping into the instincts that had long been dormant. He described the alley behind the bakery, the time the teenagers usually gathered, and precisely what had happened that afternoon. Morales exhaled slowly. Understood, sir. I'll bring a team of special instructors, and we won't be late. Henry said nothing more. He hung up the phone, sat at the desk, and looked out the window where a few kids were riding bikes down the empty street. He let out a long, steady breath, as if a part of himself that had been asleep for a long time had just awakened. That afternoon, the sky over Spokane was unusually gray. Thick, dark clouds stretched over the quiet neighborhoods in the southern part of the city, as if signaling that something was off. In the parking lot, behind the old supermarket, where a group of teenagers gathered every evening to smoke play games and mess around, loud laughter echoed between abandoned shipping containers. Kyle, the blond kid, wearing a backward baseball cap, who had pushed Mr. Henry the day before, showed a video clip of the older man stumbling and falling. The group burst into laughter. He almost turned into Superman, one of them joked, imitating Mr. Henry's shaky walk. Then came the roar of a diesel engine from the edge of the lot. A military Humvee with no license plates covered in a thick layer of reddish dust rolled in and came to a quiet stop in the middle of the lot. The door opened and 6 Marines in full service uniforms stepped out. No weapons, no shouting, but every step they took heavy steady landed with force in the kids' chests. A dark-skinned, well-built Marine with a high and tight haircut stepped forward. No one spoke. No introductions were given. But his gaze alone made the group instinctively step back. We know what happened yesterday, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but every word cut like a blade. And today, you'll relearn a word, respect. The kids let out uneasy laughs. Kyle shrugged, about to throw out a sarcastic remark. But before he could say a word, another Marine, older with graying hair and a face carved from stone, walked up and placed a rough canvas backpack in Kyle's hands. 45 pounds of sand. Put it on. What the hell, Kyle began, but the old Marine's cold stare shut him up. Less than 5 minutes later, the group was led to an empty lot beside the warehouse already set up like a mock battlefield. Barbed wire strung low to the ground, wooden posts, sand mounds, and a large photo showing soldiers crying over a fallen comrade. No one yelled. No one forced them. But none of them dared to refuse. Get down. Crawl through. Run 20 laps around the field. That pack stays on. Pretend that sand is your teammate. If it falls, he dies. The commands were sharp and firm. At first, the kids grumbled, but fatigue hit hard, fast, and relentless. Sweat poured, knees scraped and bled. By the 8th lap, a boy named Jared was dry heaving by a tree, but pushed himself up again, motivated by a cold stare still watching him. As for Kyle, his cocky attitude had vanished entirely. He collapsed onto the dirt, panting heavily, eyes wide from exhaustion. Then a Marine handed him a photo of a 19-year-old private who died in Fallujah. The words across the image read, "He died so you could laugh." Kyle's expression changed. His lips pressed into a line. His eyes reddened as if wrestling with a foreign emotion shame. Then another Marine around Mr. Henry's age stepped forward holding a crumpled letter. This is a letter from a young soldier to his mother before he died. I hope that no matter how the world changes, those we protect will cherish the freedom that my brothers and I spilled blood to preserve. No one moved, no sound, just the wind, and the kids' strained breathing filled the air. The teens stood in a row when the special training ended. Their clothes were torn and dirty, their eyes downcast. No one was laughing. No one said a word. Before leaving, the commanding officer, Lieutenant Sean Morales, looked each of them in the eye. "This is not punishment," he said. "This is a simulated training exercise outside of any official program designed to help you understand the value of gratitude and respect things school might not teach you. But life definitely will." Some of the boys lowered their heads. One mumbled softly, "I didn't know." Morales nodded. "Now you do." As the training fell silent, the evening sun had cast a golden hue over the lot. The orange clouds stretching across the horizon brought with them a strange kind of light, not harsh, but still heavy, like a realization settling in the hearts of each kid. The group stood there, clothes torn, drenched in sweat, bruises on their limbs, and dust. Each has their stance, but none is with their earlier arrogance. No one said anything. They were waiting for something, an ending, or perhaps something more profound. Then, from the far end of the lot, a figure appeared. Slow, steady. It was Mr. Henry, wearing his old military jacket, faded, but still pressed, like the day it was issued. His wooden cane tapped rhythmically against the gravel, each step sending a slight sound that somehow carried. The teens looked up. Some instinctively stepped back. Some bowed their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Mr. Henry didn't stand on the stage. He didn't need an introduction. He walked straight in, his eyes cold and sharp. Once the gaze that led his squad through Taliban fire, now filled with something else, resolve and understanding, but no indulgence. He stopped and looked each of them in the eye. Then he spoke. "I don't need you to apologize to me. I've seen more than you can imagine. But you owe my comrades, those who never got old, who never made it home like I did, a thank you." Silence. The wind rustled through the dry trees, eyes turned downward. Then, Kyle the boy, who had pushed Mr. Henry, suddenly began to cry. Not loud wails, but the choked sobs of someone who had lost something inside a long time ago. He stepped forward, his voice shaking, each word coming out like digging through something buried. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. I forgot my grandpa wore a badge like yours. And my dad was a Marine too. He died from PTSD when I was 10. The air seemed to freeze. Mr. Henry stepped closer. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at Kyle, not with the eyes of someone insulted, but someone who understood. Gently, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn military insignia. Not for show, but a personal keepsake he always carried. He placed it in Kyle's hand, a quiet reminder of honor, of the past, and responsibility. "Not to keep," he said, "to remember." "PTSD didn't kill your father," he said slowly. "It only kills those who have no one beside them to understand. And you're standing here now. This is your chance to understand. Kyle nodded, tears running down his face. His hands trembled as he touched the insignia Mr. Henry had given him like an unspoken ritual. "I won't forget again," he whispered. Lieutenant Morales stood silently behind. So did the 6 Marines. They didn't need to say anything, because at that moment, it wasn't orders or drills that changed those kids. It was gratitude and facing a past they had never dared to touch. As Mr. P. Henry turned and walked away, no one said a word, but all eyes followed, watching him like they would a father, a commander, and a living witness to something far greater than any moral lesson they had ever heard. Since that special training session, the teenagers who once mocked Mr. Henry began to change. No one forced them. No one preached to them. Something inside them woke up that afternoon. They started showing up at the local Veterans Center every week, helping clean the yard wash wheelchairs and write down small stories from the old soldiers. They listened to stories not found in textbooks about gunfire friendship and pain that couldn't be shared with anyone else. One of them, Kyle the boy who had pushed Mr. Henry to the curb, changed the most. He kept a journal about his time at the center and later turned it into an inspirational talk at school. The local high school invited Mr. Henry to speak at their graduation ceremony that June. No long speech, no PowerPoint. He stood up, looked out at the rows of students, and said 12 words: "Respect doesn't require power. It only requires you to look someone in the eye." The auditorium fell silent. Then applause broke out, not because he was famous, but because he reminded everyone of the most essential thing: dignity. As he stepped down from the stage, a young man in a graduation gown approached. It was Kyle, the same boy from that day. Now a young man, his eyes no longer confused, but filled with determination. Kyle reached out his hand for a firm shake. No words were needed. Mr. Henry nodded slightly, and they walked out of the auditorium together. No one knew what was said afterward. But some lessons don't need to be written down. They need to be witnessed and lived. After hearing this story, one thought stayed quietly. Some of the greatest life lessons come from those who never raise their voice. Mr. Henry, an elderly veteran, most people assumed was invisible, taught a group of misguided teenagers about gratitude, respect, and honor. Not through fists, not through authority, but through the living history within him and the silence that didn't need to prove anything. I kept thinking about his final words: "Respect doesn't require power. It only requires you to look someone in the eye." We live in an era where everything seems to be measured by noise. Who speaks louder, reacts faster, and stands out more. But this story made me believe that the most meaningful things often come from quiet people who live humbly and still leave a lasting impact. What about you? What do you think of the lesson Mr. Henry passed on? Have you ever met someone who didn't need to shout, but still made you change how you see things? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Who knows, your story or perspective might reach someone who needs to hear it today. And if you think this story is worth spreading, don't forget to share it with someone who could use a reminder about gratitude, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this, because the next one might just be yours.